Welcome to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. In today's episode, I am giving a little life update and talking about homeschooling. Before we get into today's content, I have a quick message to read from Prep Dish subscriber Darlene. Darlene writes, "You have all come into my life at the perfect time. I was ready. I have heard about you through the years, and I am grateful to be a recent subscriber. I heard about you on Dana K. White's podcast, and I decided to take the leap. Our meals this week have been delicious, have helped us gather as a family, and have helped me reach my goals to eat healthier. Thank you for staying on this entrepreneurship journey." Darlene, thank you so much for sharing. I always love hearing from subscribers how they came to us, when they came to us, and find it's interesting. Some people, they hear about Prep Dish for years and whatever, what is that tipping point that she decided to sign up? But I'm just glad to hear that it's helping you to eat healthier. I really like to hear that it's helping you gather as a family. That's one of my big goals with Prep Dish is giving you the tools to sit down to family meals that are healthy and tasty, but connecting too, right? That's one of the key purposes of a family meal. So thank you for sharing. And if you're listening to this and you have been hearing for a while about Prep Dish and have not tried it, maybe like Darlene, you should give it a go and see how it works for you. It's at prepdish.com/MPM, short for Meal Prep Monday. That is in the show notes if you need the link for that 2-week free trial. Okay, so for today's update, I feel like I've given a few updates related to, kind of what's going on. I feel like my life at home and family life is just constantly shifting. I think this is going to air the day before a podcast episode, an interview I did on a Day in Her Life podcast. So check that out tomorrow. Well, if you're listening to this in real time tomorrow, but if you're listening to this, I'm guessing most of you will be listening to this after. So I am on the A Day in Her Life podcast, and that was interesting to record it. If you've not heard this podcast, it's one that I listen to regularly. She interviews the guest, Ellie interviews women and talks through your day, basically from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And she goes into great detail of, how do you do your morning routine? What does bedtime look like? Where do you fit in social connection with your friends? And it's just interesting to see how others are, what they're fitting in and how they're doing it. And but going on this and trying to explain like a typical day is so... It was a bit challenging just because right now, having little kids, I feel like our seasons and rhythms are constantly in flux and constantly shifting. And I mean, specifically when you have a baby, the sleep routine is not yet dialed in. It just makes it a little more challenging to have a specific schedule. But of course, I do have a lot of routines and systems in place that I fall back on. I've just had to, I know in these seasons with the little ones, it's a little more in flux and like, okay, well, now I'm awake. So where do I start? But anyway, if you want to check that out, you can go to the A Day in Her Life podcast and get a little more insight into a day in my life. Which brings me to what I wanted to talk about today. And this is, I think, so when I recorded the episode with Ellie, this past summer, we did a little intro into homeschooling, but this fall, I'm officially homeschooling. Well, I guess all of our kids, but it's really, the older two are the ones that have a curriculum and set aside times. Tovin sits down and does homeschooling with us as well. His is a little less formal though, but he does enjoy it. But I thought I would just talk through a little bit about, what that specifically looks like for us and what's working well for us. I also was going to touch on a recent trip that we took to kick off our homeschooling year. I talk a little bit about world schooling, some visions I have for that. That's not really, going to come to full fruition just yet with having younger kids as well. But that is something that we are working towards as well. So if you're a regular listener and I've mentioned some of this, I'm not sure if I've mentioned anything related to the homeschooling yet, other than that we were doing it. But over the summer, we started out with a morning unit study. So everyone, after breakfast, and some of this relates back to things that we've talked about on this podcast over, the past years. And one of those is, rhythms and habits, and how do we establish a habit? Now, on this podcast, I go deeply into how do I get into the habit of eating healthy and preparing meals for my family? And how do I make that happen? It all comes down to habits and routines and making it a part of your life, making it a part of your identity. And so there's so much that I'm using that we've talked about over the years to implement this, this homeschooling rhythm in our household as well. So it's kind of interesting the parallels and all these, habit formation things we've talked about over the years and how they work in different areas. So with the morning unit study, I'm using that habit stacking that I've talked about a lot that works so well with meal prep of finding something we're already doing regularly and then adding another piece to it. So in this case, every morning I was sitting down with the kids and eating breakfast with them. That's something that I've done. I think I've always done that with the kids. I've always lunch, great if I can sit down and eat with the kids, but breakfast and dinner, those are the two meals that I like to always sit down and eat with them. And so for breakfast, I was already sitting down eating with them. So what we did this summer is we added on to that, right? So we just stayed a little bit longer while they were wrapping up. So this unit study, it's through a lady, I don't know what her name is, but it's Treehouse Schoolhouse. I love her curriculum. It's kind of nature-based, but each week is a different unit. And I've been able to shift it so that each unit fits in with what we're doing this summer. So when we traveled to the mountains, we talked about mountains. We did a recent trip to the beach. So we talked about seashells that week. And there's a lot of different pieces to each unit. So there's a hand rhyme. That's like a little song with the hand motions. And Tovin especially loves that. And then there's a song. So she has a Spotify playlist. And it's not, some of them are little kid songs, but some are like these beautiful folk songs. And so I always play that. And then there's a poem and some pictures and usually some sort of identification. Right now, they're identifying all the different kinds of apples. And it's funny, they'll start with maybe not knowing any of them. And then by the end of the week, they can identify all of them. And they really enjoy it. And it's fun to watch them, become more confident and get excited and accomplished in these little ways throughout the week. So yeah, that's what we did over the summer, started these unit studies. And then I would check out library books, so then kind of all week we would just figure out ways to incorporate whatever it is we're talking about. And, if it's apples, maybe we would bake with apples. Or one time it was flowers and we went to Trader Joe's and looked at all the different flowers and tried to see if we could identify any of the flowers that we were learning about. And so it's been fun to figure out just so many fun ways to incorporate the topics. So that was kind of the light introduction over the summer. And then now, that the fall is here, we are introducing math and reading and writing and literature. Through that, we're using a curriculum called The Good and the Beautiful. If you're familiar with different homeschool curriculums, it's Charlotte Mason inspired, but they really like the workbooks. And the way I've worked those into our schedule is I do those in the afternoon. The morning, I sit after breakfast. And we've added in where we do a talk about the day of okay, there's these menus and dry erase markers and they'll circle what day of the week is it? What's the temperature? What phase is the moon in? And kind of all these different, what's the month? What's the year? So kind of learning about the day and that sort of thing to start the day. But then after that wraps up, which is usually by, I want to say 8:30, we're wrapping that up. Again, it's not a strict timing, but I just kind of know that once I wrap that up, my mornings are my most productive time. So I still stick with working up until lunch. And then after lunch, sometime in the afternoon, that's when I then pull them aside, the older boys aside, to do more of what they call seated work. And that's where I sit down and do this, the Good and Beautiful curriculum with them. And we're only a weekend. By no means am I an expert, definitely learning as I go. One of the reasons, behind the decision to do all this was I knew longer term, we were interested in homeschooling and specifically world schooling. And I thought we'd do, maybe once they're older, but it finally hit me that what better time to start than now so we can find our footing and figure it all out when they are a little younger and it is a little more lower risk. And I can, experiment and learn their learning styles and my teaching styles and, for a weekend. But so far, they are really enjoying the Good and the Beautiful program. They are just blowing through the lessons and having fun with them and asking to do them. And so it's just, I think that's one of my primary goals is that they're excited about it. And it's not something that they're dreading or feeling like they have to do, but it's something that they're wanting to do and that they're really, kind of thirsty for learning more and have a love for learning. So all of that going well so far. I wanted to touch on our most recent trip. I did pop onto Instagram stories for a brief few days. When I used to travel, if any of you have been listening or following along with Prep Dish for the past, 13, 14, however many years we've been around, I used to, when we would travel, I would get on Instagram and post a lot, or even, gosh, back in the day, I think I did Snapchat for a while, if any of you have been around that long. But then, once we started having kids, it got a little trickier. And now, with 4 kids, it's just like impossible to try and fit any of that in. It's like, I want to be there and present with my family. But, this most recent trip I did was with the older kids. And what we did, so back to the vision of world schooling. So that's something that my husband and I have both, before we had kids, we were avid travelers. And even with kids, we've traveled quite a bit. And that's something we really see for our future, is being able to do more of that, and having maybe even a year or two where we are exclusively traveling and doing like a world school curriculum, like incorporating their schoolwork into the travels. And so to kick off this school year, I booked a trip, and I think it was maybe an episode in May. I'll try and find it, but I did a pretty extensive course on credit card points and miles and how to use all of that to help pay for travel. And honestly, in taking that course, the only thing I was like, oh my gosh, I should have started doing this a long time ago, like figuring out how to be more intentional with my credit card points and miles and all this. So anyway, but this most recent trip, and if you guys want me to go more in depth on this, I can. But again, I think that episode covers a lot of it. But I used what I learned from that course and booked a trip for just me and the older 2 boys as sort of this homeschool kickoff. So the way that it was booked was, it was 2 different tickets, but we ended up doing 3 different stops. So we went to Charlotte, we then went to Aruba, and then Miami, and then back home. All of it for only a few $100s. And just, a fantastic trip. It was so much fun. And we got to incorporate, again, some of the unit study on seashells. And when we were in Charlotte, we stopped at a museum, and they had a special exhibit on oceans. And so just really kind of incorporating everything. And it was a lot of fun. And I just have a lot of visions for doing more of this. I think the more extensive travel will come later, when the younger 2 are a little older. It's just, we did a bigger trip with the whole family in early August, and a lot of fun. But, toddler and baby are a little, they're just harder to travel with. We'll do it, but probably don't want to do it all the time. So yeah. And then, so for the homeschooling, I guess that's kind of where we're at. We're having fun with it, very new. They do have a co-op they go to once a week. And of course, I'm trying to incorporate some intentional time in the kitchen. They're already in the kitchen a lot, but with some of the different, whether it's science or math or anything again, like the unit study on apples, we are, so I bought a bunch of different varieties, and we're going to do a taste test. So really, of course, trying to figure out how to include time and activities in the kitchen as well. So really looking forward to that. And I can share along some of those. I know some of it may not be as relevant for some of you, but again, we're just having a fun time with it. So that is my update on where we are at with our slightly new rhythm and dipping our toes into homeschooling. If you guys have any questions, you can always, if you're in our Facebook group or on Instagram, I'm at Prep Dish. But that's where we're at. And stay tuned over the next few weeks. I am currently working on a workshop for Prep Dish. Excited about this one. I sent out a survey to all of you just this week and got a really big response. Like, I think a few hundred of you were interested in this topic. So I'm going to talk more about that maybe next week or the week after, but I think later September, we're getting that figured out, getting that on the calendar, but there will be a workshop coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's all I have for today. I will be back again next Monday with another episode.